Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that's, well, it's everywhere but often unseen: microfiber pollution.
That's right. And we've got some really fascinating sources you shared. They cover a lot of ground, from identifying the problem, looking at solutions, even regulations.
Yeah, a real mix. So our mission today is to kind of sift through all that, pull out the key information, what these things are, their impact, what we can do, without getting totally overwhelmed.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Let's start right at the beginning. What exactly are microfibers? I mean, the term gets thrown around a lot.
Good question. Basically, our sources define microplastics, and microfibers are a type of microplastic as plastic particles. They range in size,
Yeah.
quite a bit actually, from just 1 nanometer, which is incredibly tiny.
Nanometer, wow.
Yeah, all the way up to 5 millimeters. And it's that small size that's really key to why they spread so easily.
Right. It makes sense they'd get everywhere. And some of the numbers in these sources are pretty staggering. I saw one figure: 85% of shoreline pollution globally. Is that right?
It is. One paper highlighted that specifically for microfibers, 85%. It really puts it in perspective. Most of the plastic pollution on beaches isn't the big bottles, it's these tiny fibers.
That's huge. And then there's the finding that they're showing up in, like, our food, fish and shellfish in places like California, Indonesia.
Yeah, that's definitely a concerning find mentioned in the sources. It brings it really close to home, doesn't it? From an environmental issue to something potentially on our plates.
Absolutely. Okay, so they're tiny plastic bits. They're on beaches, potentially in seafood.
Yeah.
Where do they all come from in the first place?
Well, the number one source, highlighted again and again, is our clothing. Synthetic clothes.
Like polyester and nylon?
Exactly. Polyester, nylon, acrylics, spandex, all that stuff. Every single time we wash them, they shed fibers. Thousands of them.
Thousands, really.
Oh, yeah. One study we looked at put a number on it. A single 6 kilogram wash load. Over 700,000 fibers released.
Right. 700,000 from one wash.
Yep. And apparently fleece garments are particularly bad. They seem to release the highest percentage, probably because of how they're made, fuzzy and loosely woven.
That's wild. Makes you look at your laundry pile differently. But it's not just clothes, is it? I think I saw other sources mentioned.
No, you're right. Clothes are a big one, maybe the biggest, but not the only one. Things like cleaning towels, mops,
Right.
fleece blankets, even soft toys for kids, those can shed too.
Huh. Things you wouldn't immediately think of.
And then there's construction and renovation. The dust from cutting or sanding materials like PVC, polycarbonate, polypropylene,
Yeah.
that can release microplastics into the air.
Airborne microplastics. Great.
And more recently, single-use face masks. They're often made of polypropylene.
Right. And I think I saw something about coffee cups, the disposable paper ones.
Yeah, isn't that surprising? Those plastic linings,
Yeah.
apparently they can release nanoplastics when hot liquid is poured in.
Nanoplastics, so even smaller than microplastics.
Exactly, generally under 100 nanometers. So small they might pass through biological barriers more easily. That's another layer of concern.
Okay, it really feels like these sources are everywhere. Now, you mentioned microplastics. Some are intentionally made small, right? Primary microplastic.
Correct. Those are manufactured small for specific uses, like abrasives used in surface blasting.
Blasting, like sandblasting.
Sort of, yeah. Used to remove rust or paint from surfaces. These plastic beads are used instead of sand sometimes. They break down, get discarded, often contaminated with whatever they removed.
Okay, got it. So unintentional shedding from washing and use. Intentional primary ones. And they all end up somewhere. Let's talk environment. What's the impact?
Well, the big thing is persistence. Plastic doesn't really break down like natural fibers, cotton, wool. They biodegrade eventually. Plastic fibers, they stick around for potentially centuries.
Centuries.
And they get into our water systems through all sorts of ways. Rain runoff, carrying them off streets, wastewater from our homes, even treated wastewater doesn't get all of them out. Industrial discharges, sewer overflows when it rains heavily.
So lots of pathways into rivers and oceans.
Exactly. Plus the breakdown of larger plastic items already out there, and even atmospheric deposition stuff settling out of the air. Oh, and get this. Even plastic bottles and caps, like for bottled water, can shed microplastics into the water.
Seriously. So even bottled water isn't necessarily safe from them.
It seems that way, according to some of these findings. It's another potential source.
Okay, so they get into the water, and then what? They just float around?
Not exactly. They enter the food chain. The sources are pretty clear on this. Tiny little zooplankton eat them.
The bottom of the food chain.
Right? And then fish eat the zooplankton. Bigger fish eat smaller fish. all the way up to whales. They've been found in all sorts of animals.
Whales, too?
Yep, and birds, amphibians, even in really remote places, like high up in mountains, far from cities. It shows how widely they travel.
That's deeply unsettling, just this invisible plastic contamination everywhere. And it's not just the plastic itself, right? There was something about chemicals.
You're right to bring that up. It's a dual problem.
Yeah.
One study mentioned finding PBDEs. Those are flame retardant chemicals
Okay.
in seabirds called shear waters. And the thinking is they got these chemicals from eating plastic that contained them or had absorbed them from the water.
So the plastics act like little sponges for other pollutants, too.
They can, yeah. So animals might ingest the physical plastic and a dose of associated chemicals. These can then build up in their tissues, bioaccumulation.
Which makes the potential harm much greater.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot to humans. What do the sources say about direct impacts on us?
Well, as we mentioned, they've been detected in seafood sold for human consumption, but also in other things. Table salt, honey, even beer.
Beer. Wow. Salt and honey, too. It's getting hard to avoid.
It does seem pretty widespread in the food supply. Now, one source did mention that standard water filtration, like the kind you might have at home, it can be pretty effective at removing particles from your drinking water. So that's something.
Okay, that's good to know for tap water. But it doesn't help with food sources or the overall pollution.
Exactly. And in terms of health effects, well, it's still a big area of research. But the sources raise concerns. Things like the plastic monomers themselves, dyes used in fabrics, other additives like plasticizers. These can leach out.
And what might those do?
Again, research is ongoing, but studies, some in mice, suggest potential impacts. Things affecting the digestive system, reproductive system, even the nervous system. There's evidence of particles accumulating in tissues, affecting gut bacteria, liver function.
Okay, so definitely cause for concern and needing more research. It really drives home the need to do something. Which brings us to solutions. What can individuals do?
That 15 Ways article had some ideas, right?
It did. Some very practical things, like
Yeah.
simply wash synthetic clothes less often, use shorter cycles.
Makes sense. Less
Yeah.
washing, less shedding. Right. Also, fill up the washing machine. Apparently, less room for clothes to tumble means less friction, so fewer fibers break off.
Oh, interesting. Counterintuitive, maybe, but
Okay. And then there's conscious consumption. Avoid, super cheap fast fashion. It tends to be lower quality, sheds more.
and choose natural fibers instead.
Exactly. Organic cotton, wool, linen. Those are highlighted. Thrifting them is even better, gives them a longer life. And just talking about it, telling friends, family, raising awareness.
Awareness is key. And one commenter specifically mentioned wool sportswear.
Yeah, from Ibex. As a natural alternative that performs well, doesn't hold odors like synthetics sometimes do, and is often made locally in the US or Canada. So specific examples like that help.
So better washing habits, better buying habits, natural fibers, and filtering drinking water as a personal step.
Right. Filter your water if you're concerned about direct intake that way. It doesn't solve the big problem, but it's a measure you can take.
Okay, those are individual actions. But this problem feels more than just individual choices. What about larger scale solutions?
Definitely. Several sources stressed tackling it at the source. It's way more effective to prevent fibers getting out than trying to clean them up later.
How do you do that at the source?
Well, one commenter pointed out that filters on home washing machines can help. They trap lint. Interestingly, the trapped lint can then help filter more lint in the next wash.
Huh. Like a self-improving filter.
Kind of, yeah. But scaling that up for huge wastewater treatment plants is apparently really tough technologically and energy-wise.
Right, the volume of water is immense.
But there is innovation happening. We saw mentions of companies developing new materials like polyester-free outdoor gear that still wicks moisture. So alternatives are being explored.
That's encouraging. What about regulations?
Yeah.
Laws and government action?
That's seen as crucial. Calls for major legislation to make companies producing plastic goods, including clothes, more responsible for the end-of-life impact.
Holding producers accountable.
Exactly. And also, proactive laws to encourage plastic replacements, maybe even support a return to some older, pre-plastic ways of doing things where appropriate. Groups like the Plastic Pollution Coalition are mentioned as resources for tracking this stuff.
And this has to be global, right? Plastic pollution doesn't respect borders.
Absolutely not. The UN Environment Assembly has resolutions on marine plastic and microplastics. The goal is international cooperation to control release, find alternatives, reverse the damage. It's about managing plastics sustainably through their whole life cycle.
Are countries actually doing things?
Yes, there are examples. China has regulations. Hong Kong started restricting some plastics in 2024. Haiti banned certain bags and foam containers. Lots of countries have plastic bag laws, bans, or taxes. Some target microbeads. ASEAN has a regional action plan for marine debris.
So things are happening, but it sounds patchy.
It is, and the sources note challenges.
Mm.
Enforcing these laws globally is hard. Countries have different systems, different economic situations. What works in one place might not work in another.
Makes sense. Lots of hurdles. Did the sources mention any other cool innovations besides new fabrics?
There was one mention of a young innovator, Fion Ferreira. He developed a device using ferrofluid, like a magnetic liquid, to pull microplastics out of water. Pretty clever stuff.
Wow, that's neat. Using magnets, basically.
In a way, yeah. It shows there's potential for technological fixes, too, alongside prevention and policy.
Okay, so we've got individual actions, corporate innovation, government regulation, international cooperation. What about the role of consumers versus businesses more broadly?
Well, back to the individual, one commenter really hit on the need for realistic and actionable suggestions. People need to feel they can make changes.
Good point. Don't make it seem impossible.
And on the business side, you see groups like Green America highlighting members making plastic-free products, like an organic cotton bag for drying clothes instead of dryer sheets.
Simple alternatives.
Yeah. And apps are being developed to help consumers identify products with microplastics so they can make informed choices. Plus, some big companies, Toyota, Walmart, P&G were mentioned, are apparently starting to take more responsibility for their plastic waste through better disposal or recycling programs.
So a multi-pronged approach seems necessary.
Uh,
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive?
I'd say number one, microfiber pollution is real, it's significant, and it's widespread, largely from synthetic clothes, but other plastics too.
Right.
Number two, it impacts ecosystems globally, gets into the food chain, and raises potential human health questions that need more answers.
Definitely.
And number three, while the problem is complex, there are actions happening at all levels, individual choices, new technologies, business shifts, and government policies, both locally and internationally. It's not hopeless, but it's a huge challenge.
That sums it up well.
Ah,
Which leaves us with a final thought, something to chew on. Given the just unbelievable volume of these tiny plastics getting out there and how they seem to get into everything, even remote nature, even our food, are the current efforts enough? Focusing on filters, better washing, recycling, is that sufficient?
or
Or do we need a more fundamental shift? Do we need to seriously rethink our reliance on synthetic materials altogether? Is fixing the end of pipe the real answer, or do we need to turn off the tap upstream?
that is the big question, isn't it? How deep does the change need to go?
Something for everyone to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.